Welcome to episode 11, where we're going to ask the question, what's in the black box? Many AI models are inherently interpretable. Think linear regression, which we've talked about, where we know exactly if we change the inputs, how they will impact the outputs, and we can map that prediction back to the inputs. Similarly, another machine learning model that is inherently interpretable is a decision tree. And a decision tree charts how a model makes decisions in a way that's really similar to humans. For example, should I bring my umbrella today? Well, maybe the first question you ask is it currently raining? If yes, then you bring your umbrella. If no, then you check the weather. If the weather says it's going to rain later, then you bring an umbrella. And if not, you don't. Now, we've been talking a lot about neural networks in this episode series, and we've already talked about the fact that neural networks are black box models. And what do I mean when I say a black box model? I mean that the input is human understandable and the output is human understandable, but how that input actually gets mapped to the output is not understandable by humans. So, for example, here we have an image of the Duke Chapel as our input, and then the output, we have a box around the chapel with the label chapel. So we understand the input and we understand the output, but we don't know how the model got from input to output. Similarly with text, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy. The output is dog here, but we don't know how it got mapped that way. Or how about a medical example where we're trying to predict the flu? So maybe we have measures like heart rate and your activity levels, your stress, your sleep, and then we have a prediction of flu onset. How the model made this prediction, if we make this prediction with a black box model, we don't know. We don't know how the input gets mapped to the output. But black box models are being used all of the time to make decisions, often very critical decisions. Now, when we think about a decision, I really like this quote that's attributed to Plato. A good decision is based on knowledge and not on numbers. What do I mean when I say this? Well, let's take an example of the ice cream sales. Now, ice cream sales peak in the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere. Shark attacks also peak in the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere. This may lead you to ask the question, does eating ice cream cause shark attacks? And based on the numbers, it absolutely does, right? If you just look at this plot, you'll say, well, absolutely. Shark attacks are directly influenced by eating ice cream, so we need to ban eating ice cream. But you'd be ignoring your knowledge in this situation, specifically your knowledge that in the summer months, the temperature is warmer, thus increasing the number of people who want to enjoy a cold, delicious treat like ice cream, and increasing the number of people entering the ocean, thus increasing the rate of shark attacks. Similarly, when we look at an AI model, we often look at numbers and we don't consider our knowledge. So for example, here is a highly accurate model between a husky and a wolf. This had greater than 90% accuracy. The model was very good at determining whether an image was a husky or a wolf. And if we just went by the numbers, we would say, wow, this is a great model. It's very accurate. However, we'd be ignoring our knowledge in this situation, specifically our knowledge that it is the background of the image, specifically whether there's snow in the background, that determines whether this image is predicted as a husky or a wolf by an AI model. Similarly, a recent study looked at water birds or land birds, and they wanted to build a model that would take an image of a bird and it would determine whether it is a water bird or a land bird. And so the training data looked like the data on the left-hand side of the screen, land birds on land, water birds on water, how you would see them in their natural habitats. And then if you look at the data on the right is data that they wanted to test this model on, which includes land birds on water and water birds on land. Note, this does not look like the training data. And you probably see where this is going, that all of the data that looked like the training data was accurately classified by the model, and all of the data that did not look like the training data was incorrectly classified by the model. They applied some explainability techniques to show that, in fact, the background of the image is what was being used to determine whether this bird was a water bird or a land bird. Now, in some applications, this may be just fine. You may not actually need to detect the bird. You might be fine just detecting the background. However, in applications where you are expecting the model to be focused on the bird and not on the background, this can cause very drastic consequences. Let's take a look at a medical example. And so these are misclassifications in a dermatological cancer screening AI tool. You can see this is where the prediction was malignant and the ground truth was benign, or the opposite, where the prediction was benign and the ground truth was malignant. And they applied an explainability technique here called counterfactuals. And counterfactuals tell us that errant hairs and errant pigments in the image are what's causing the misclassifications. Inherently interpretable models make the black box transparent. So focusing on inherently interpretable models is a great first step. And if you do have to use a black box model, like a lot of the neural network-based models that are used today in a variety of applications, then it's important to try out post hoc explainability methods. Post hoc explainability methods allow us to better understand a model's decision. For example, here you can see a counterfactual. We have a sample of interest. We change that sample until we get a prediction of a 6, and then we can see the difference. And this helps us better understand how a model is making decisions. But it's not inherently interpretable. Inherently interpretable machine learning allows us to map input to output directly, where explainable machine learning lets us take a peek inside the model or change the inputs and see how that changes the outputs. All right, that is the end of episode 11. In episode 12, we're going to talk about why this lack of AI understandability makes it easy to then fool AI. Thank you for joining me for this episode in the AI for People Who Hate Math series. This is an unscripted series that is inspired by my conversations with people who feel like they can't conceptually understand AI because it's just too much math. And it usually is. Most AI classes, tutorials, and videos are full of math. The AI classes that I teach as a professor have math on nearly every slide. I wanted to challenge this assumption that AI could only be conceptualized by people with strong math backgrounds. Especially as AI permeates our daily lives, I think it's important that everyone understands the technology, at least conceptually. Because without it, we're putting a lot of trust into systems we don't understand. Feel free to let me know in the comments if there are topics that you want to see covered. The initial launch is 20 episodes, and I am excited to see what you think.